Today, guys, I'm going to teach you how to do an elimination diet correctly. So we all know at least one person who have tried a keto diet, an intermittent fasting diet, or some sort of juice cleanse, and whom has lost a lot of weight, but for some reason, they have always eventually regained some of that weight, or regained all the weight, or regained way much more than what they used to have, and pretty much were back to square one. And that's because they have not done any of those diets properly, and that's exactly what I am going to be talking about today. I guess here comes my first opinion already. I don't think an elimination diet is useful and is needed unless someone has some form of intolerances, allergy, or someone has some health conditions related to eating a certain type of food. For example, an intolerance to milk, right? If you are the type to go and shit water or go and shit blocks of stones whenever you finish drinking some form of cheese, some form of yogurt, some form of milk, fine, by all means, stay away from milk. You have to eliminate milk from your diet. But if you're not the type of person who has those any sort of reactions like that whenever you eat something, then I don't see the point. But I do understand how some people like to associate with the idea that if they eliminate this food group right here, now they are going to label themselves as that person who eliminates this food group. They kind of belong to some sort of category or some sort of cult, and now they can say wherever they go with whoever they hang out that, hey, now I'm doing a keto diet, I'm not gonna eat some carbs, hey, no, I'm fasting, I still got 10 minutes before my eating window opens up, so go screw yourself. You know, there is this being cool aspect of doing elimination diet that I do understand, believe it or not. But anyway, again, the main problem was the fact that most people, they look cool at first, but then they feel like trash and they end up regaining the weight. And that's because of everything that I'm gonna teach you and tell you about today. So, without going further into any of those three diets, first I'm gonna explain you how weight loss work, how dieting in order for you to go from a certain body size to a certain smaller body size work. Okay, I'm gonna teach you how a caloric deficit work. A calorie deficit basically is the fact of seeing the amount of calories that you currently consume and to create a deficit. As simple as that. Now, diets are a way to facilitate calorie deficit without having to calculate, weigh, or track any sort of food groups. Because, I mean, when you speak about calories, we think of how many calories does a food have. And that implies that you're gonna have to do some form of tracking and calculation. You're gonna have to get nerdy with things with which not everybody has the time for. So diets and elimination diets mostly make sense because the fact that you are going to take out a certain food group or a certain amount or portion size of food out of your diet is going to also indirectly or directly, by the way, enable you to take off the amount of calories that was contained in that food. All right, so let's look at the keto diet, for example, and that's going to be our very first diet that we are going to be speaking about today. So what is the keto diet? Is the fact of eliminating all carbohydrates from your diet, meaning bread, rice, pasta, banana, sugar, any sort of fruit and those kinds of things, and to pretty much increase the amount of fat, dietary healthy fat in your diet. So that would be eggs, mostly the yellow. That will be avocado, that will be salmon, that will be fatty steak, and pretty butter, those kinds of things. Okay, and with regards to protein, that pretty much stays there, which we'll touch on in a few. But basically, normally in everybody's diets, they have those three food groups. They eat those three food groups, right? So let's suppose that in a day you always eat about 4 units of protein. Let me make it super simple. In that same day, you eat about 4 units of carbs. In that same day, you eat about 4 units of fats. If the keto diet requires you to increase your fat intake and decrease your carb intake, The 4 units of fat might now become 5 to 6 units of fat. The 4 units of carbs might not become 1 or 0 units of carbs, and the 4 units of protein might also stay the same. And that's pretty much how you lose weight through the keto diet, because 4 units of carbohydrates, that's a lot of calories. So by decreasing that and by simply eating just a bit more fat, you are creating a caloric deficit, but you're not necessarily eating more food through the increased fat intake. And that's pretty much how you lose weight by doing a keto diet. Most people speak about the fact that when you are in something that we call ketosis, your body start to use more fat and burns more fat as fuel. No shit. You have deprived your body from one of its preferred and one of its usual and habitual fuel source of energy, which were the carbs. And you have added more fats, which is the second source of energy. So what is your body, which by the way is wired for helping you survive and thrive? What is your body gonna do? The most logical thing to do is now you're gonna turn to utilizing the fats. But also something that people believe is that because now you're in ketosis, your body's gonna burn more fat, so you're gonna lose more fat. But there are a lot of studies that actually show the fact that it's not really the fact that you change from a certain amount of fat that you burn fat, but it is still the caloric deficit that you have created through eliminating all the carbs. This is what really guarantees your results. That means that, let's suppose you get into a keto diet, okay, and that you have the proteins, the carbs, and the fats, and you eliminate all the proteins, and then you think that because you want to get fast into that state of ketosis, you are going to increase your fat intake, but then you increase the fat intake so much to the point where now you are eating a lot of fat, which nearly represents the amount of carbs that you have cut out. It's kind of like you cut out the carbs to add them up to the fat. That actually gets you back to eating the same amount of food. The type of food that you eat are just different, but the amount of food is the same, so weight loss is not going to happen, all right? This is why keto dieting itself should be an attempt for you to eliminate some type of food because you're trying to regulate blood sugar, because you got some form of health reason, because you got some form of health optimization and well-being optimization that you want to work on. By the way, people with diabetes type 2, if I'm not wrong, benefit a lot from the keto diet. Putting that aside, you need to do a keto diet for health benefits, but not necessarily for weight loss benefits, because you can still mess it up even despite being in the keto diet. But let's suppose that you succeed and that you lose the weight. And what usually happens is that the person gets super fatigued, they cannot take the energy drops anymore, and they pretty much start to feel sick because, well, low carbs, high fat. For some people, that just does not sit well. So the way for you to do a keto diet properly is do not rush to eliminate the carbs, all right? Do never rush to do any sort of drastic change in your diet. This is something that I see from experience all the time with coaching people. Someone wakes up one day and decides, hey, I'm gonna start a keto diet. I'm gonna go from eating 5 units of carbs today to eating 0 units of carbs today. Of course, you're gonna hijack your body. Your body's gonna wake up and say, hey, what the fuck is going on here? I used to have all this food and now I have 0 food. Fine, I'm gonna roll with it, but let me tell you that sooner or later I'm gonna claim back that food. Because also one thing that people do whenever they cut down a certain food group is that now they ramp up their level of activity. Less energy coming in, more energy coming out. That's a big deficit. This is why people usually lose a lot of weight, but also at the same time slowly start to feel bad. So instead of cutting out all the carbs from your diet right away, I would actually recommend to keep everything the same, but to just work on increasing your fat intake. Just work on that first, because sooner or later, if you really want to do a keto diet, then you already have to be used to eating a certain amount of fat and to get your body into a state of pre-ketosis. That's how I like to call it. Get your body used to being in a certain kind of state that is similar to a ketosis before you get your body into a low carb state, because adding more food focusing on eating more food is better than already working to eliminate a certain type of food. Which, by the way, brings us to the reason why I'm suggesting you this hack is the fact that by increasing your fat intake, you are going to effectively become less hungry, and the carbs intakes are going to decrease naturally without you forcing too much. All right, but of course, it's not gonna get you all the way down to how much did you need to eat. You need to limit your carbs to 50 grams per day if you only get into ketosis. That's pretty much the equivalent of 2 bananas, which is almost no carbs at all. So my second recommendation is going to be do not directly attempt to get there. Okay, so again, week number 1, I recommend don't change your diet at all. Just work on eating more fats. Maybe this is going to make you feel heavy. Maybe this is going to make you gain a bit of weight, but that's okay. We want to focus on doing more of what lacks instead of already rushing to removing what we have too much of. Trust me, in terms of psychology, having this approach is gonna be way much more better. Okay, week number 1, just focus on that. Week number 2, you are gonna now increase your protein intake. You're still not decreasing the carbs or cutting down anything. You're just fueling your body pretty much using the first 2 weeks just as some form of prep for your body. You're gonna increase your protein intake. And then week number 3 is where you are slowly going to start cutting down the carbs. But even while cutting down your carbs, do not directly go from, let's say, 100% straight to 10% or 0%. Go from 100% to 50% on the first week, from 50% to now 30% on the third week, and then on the fourth week, from 50% all the way down to ketosis level. That's how you should approach a keto diet. You should start first by increasing your fat intake, keep carbs the same, then increase your protein intake, and then week after week slowly decrease your carbs intake while you keep the proteins and the fats the same. So it's pretty much one whole month of prep to get you into the keto diet, if mostly you want to make sure that you're not going to feel like shit by the end of it and that it is not going to be too hard for you. This brings us to now intermittent fasting. How intermittent fasting work and why it has some magic effect of making you lose weight, which, by the way, it doesn't have anything magic. Cut out one meal out of your day and of course you are going to lose weight, because that meal has at least 500 to 800 calories. So now if you were someone who used to eat, let's say, 3 meals, and that now you're gonna have that magic window of eating, and that instead of having the 3 usual meal, you're gonna wait until a certain time of the day to finally have your meal, which is gonna be the second meal of the day, meaning you have cut out the first meal, then you have cut out at least 500 to 700 calories of your diet, and that's where your caloric deficit comes from. Meaning that, and this happens a lot of time too, by the way, I often have people coming to me telling me that they're already eating only 1 meal a day, intermittent fasting, but they struggle to lose weight. And typically this is because the person, they starve themselves and they deprive themselves so much by having such a big non-eating window that by the time where it's already and finally time to have that 1 meal of the day, they use that meal as a salvation meal. It's the meal that's gonna save their lives, and they overload the hell out of their plate. They use that meal as if it was the meal that they needed and as if it was their last meal for the next 3 days, which make them end up eating a lot of calories, which sometimes is so many calories to the point where it was more calories than what they used to eat when they used to eat only normally 3 times. Again, that's where intermittent fasting has its value, because if you're someone who does not know or does not want to track food, and if you want a very quick way to just cut out some calories out of your diet in order for you to lose weight, then cut out 1 meal. Actually, we should not even call it intermittent fasting. We should call it meal skipping, because that's really the idea of it. People sometimes they get super crazy about the timing. That timing is not gonna do shit. Like, sure, okay, if you fast in the morning, if you start to fast the night before and that you fast until 12 the next morning, sure, you're going to have a peak of adrenaline, you're going to be more alert, but this is something that I've noticed in the category of people that I help. Anyone who fast early in the morning or who just skip a meal in the day, either that is breakfast or lunch or dinner, or someone who just skips a specific type of food, going back to the keto diet, who has no carbs or just something that lacks in their diet that they think they are doing for the sake of losing weight, is also someone who is always going to experience some form of energy drops, focus drops, mood drops, hormonal drops, and crazy cravings. And that is going to turn all of that combined is going to throw them into a cycle of binge restrict, binge restrict, binge restrict. So intermittent fasting works, but pay attention to how drastic you want it to be, which now leads us to how to approach an intermittent fasting diet the right way so that it actually works. Well, this is going to surprise you, but I don't actually recommend you to do an intermittent fasting diet. What I recommend you to do is a protein fasting diet, okay? Because the thing with losing weight is that you want to make sure that you lose only fat, okay? And you want to make sure that you don't become too hungry. You want to make sure that you don't lose muscle while you lose weight, because intermittent fasting is that powerful. I mean, again, you cut out an entire meal of your diet. That's a lot of calories. That's a huge caloric deficit that you create. And sometimes when a caloric deficit is that aggressive, it can have very big impact on your energy, on your hormones, on your metabolism, and also mostly on your levels of hunger, which based on the kind of person you are, if you are very busy in a day, if you're always on the go in a day, then usually at night, that's when that hunger catches you and makes you eat back everything. So whatever you do in terms of weight loss, you should always prioritize a high enough protein intake. Your protein intake should always be high, okay? And nowadays it's easy to figure out your protein intake. Just type into ChatGPT, hey, I'm an XXX person with XXX height, XXX weight. Please calculate based on my height and my weight, what should be my ideal body weight. Then with that body weight, with that ideal body weight, please give me a target of protein that I should aim for in a day. And that should be your goal. You should always aim for a decent amount of protein just in order for you to offset any sort of hunger or energy drops or loss of muscle, which unfortunately, if you are doing an intermittent fasting diet, the fact of keeping one meal makes it really hard to hit the goal of protein that you have. I know this from experience. As soon as you lose and you get rid of that one meal, it's gonna be really hard for you to stuff your face up with like all the proteins that you're supposed to eat just in the short time frame that you have left, unless you are okay with having a lot of discomfort in your gut and pretty much feeling like trash because you're just full of protein. So I recommend people, instead of doing intermittent fasting and just skip one meal, let's say for example that what you want to do normally is you skip your breakfast, you drink coffee and water instead, then you have a lunch at about 3 p.m. and then you have a dinner at about I don't know, like before you start your fasting window. So that would be about 7 p.m., 8 p.m. I would recommend my clients, if they're really go getters, and if they really want to go hard on intermittent fasting, do not completely skip any meal in the morning. Have yourself a bite of protein. Just have yourself a bite of protein. That is going to sustain you. That is going to help you avoid the hunger from accumulating too much, and that is going to avoid you from treating your first meal, the breakfast meal at 2 to 3 p.m. as a salvation meal. Because again, this is really one problem that I see in the world of weight loss. Restricting the food is not the real problem, but the problem is that when people restrict a certain type of food or have those kinds of ground rules that are guaranteed to make them lose weight, usually that same restriction is what makes the devil appear. Because the more you restrict and the longer you restrict, the more you have these impulses and pretty much need to make up for it. That can be in your mind, and that is also definitely how your body works, because your body hates any sort of transformation, either that is to gain weight or to lose weight. Your body, if it had the choice, it would have stayed the same, right? So whenever you lose weight, and when you lose it very aggressively, your body is going to force you to, hey, eat that stuff again. I want to go back to where I was. I don't like what you're doing right now, eliminating one meal, eliminating carb. I want all that food back again so I can maintain my weight. It's something that we call homeostasis, or also something, the more simple word that I like to use is baseline. Your body always likes to stay at baseline. So when you do an intermittent fasting, when you skip that meal, and when you do any sort of diet with very strong restrictions, unless you are someone who is really mentally sharp and mentally disciplined and dedicated, then sooner or later that same intensity of restriction usually always correlates to the intensity at which you fuck up the day where the devil comes talk to you, the day where you're up late until 1 a.m. At night, and you go into the fridge and you see the small box of cookie, and you realize that you can just order something real quick, so you order 10 boxes of cookies instead, and the night is just wasted and your whole diet is wasted. You get into a negative self-talk. You tell yourself, hey, screw this, I fucked up anyway, let me keep fucking up some more, and then you get into a cycle of regaining all the weight. That exact scenario of fuck ups is correlated with the intensity of restrictions and rules and elimination and prohibition that you set around your day-to-day diet. So actually, if you've ever failed to sustain a diet, then just ask yourself, did I fail to sustain the diet? Or did I just succeed at making my diet unsustainable in the first place? You know? Which brings us to the third and the last diet, which is a juice cleanse. And this is a very simple one, guys. Nobody has ever lived off of just drinking juice. We're not babies. Our teeth are made to eat and to chew something. So how are you, a grown-ass person, realistically thinking that now you're gonna stop chewing anything and you're just gonna mix some celeries and some strawberries and some water and some whatever kind of healthy type of thing you eat with cucumber and water and just drink that in a day? What are we doing? You know what I'm saying? Just drink that and drink that and drink that. No, that is not a life. I do not recommend anybody to do any sort of juice cleanse. All right? But if you're crazy, then here's what you should do, okay? Do not eliminate all food from your diet. Do not rely on the juice cleanse, because again, by now you should understand that you could follow the settings of your diet, but still eat like an asshole, and you'll still get back into a caloric surplus. For example, with the keto diet, you could cut out all the carbs from your diet, but if you eat back the amount of those carbs through the fats that you need to get into ketosis, you'll still be in a caloric surplus. You're not gonna lose weight. You could cut out 1 meal of the day, 2 meals of the day, and do an intermittent fasting diet. But then, if once it is the time for you to eat that one meal that is allocated in your eating window, once it's time for you to eat that, you treat that meal as a buffet, and you have like 1 to 3 plates in front of you because you think that famine is coming and you're not gonna eat anymore in 3 days. If you treat that meal as a makeup and salvation meal, you're gonna get into a caloric surplus. You're not gonna lose weight. So don't act surprised if, hey, I'm cutting food group, hey, I'm having a fasting window, but I'm not losing weight. It's because you don't actually respect the law and the rules of caloric deficit. In the end, it's all caloric deficit, guys. The most simple way for you to diet is make all of your meals, whatever they are, whatever it is that you eat every day, go from this to this. That's literally all that I should have said in this video. That's really how everything works. But everybody just keeps getting it twisted. That's really how weight loss works. If we only speak about weight loss, make your foods go from this to this. That's all. No need to have any sort of timing, no need to have any sort of what kind of distribution of this and that, no need to have any sort of no, just this, just that. No, from this to this, which brings us back to the topic of the juices. Make the juice, use the juice as actually, I'm convinced that if you keep eating the same thing and that you just front load your juices, your detox juices or whatever bullshit you believe in the morning, then that's actually going to help you already with controlling your hunger and eating less food in the end. But if you just want to rely on detox juices and not eat food at all, then of course you're going to starve yourself. Of course, your body doesn't have anything at all to keep it busy. You cannot hope to keep your big stomach and your big body fueled just with juice, right? Doesn't make sense. Okay, so use the juice as a tool for you to then later on try your best to moderate your food intake over here. And that's it, guys. So again, big conclusion is elimination diets work, but sometimes the rate of elimination and the intensity at which we eliminate and create those ground rules around us are just too harsh. So I hope that all of those were useful tips for you to go into your next elimination diet, even though, just like what I said, I believe you don't need to do any of that. And yeah, let me know what you think of this video, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.